Hello everyone, this is Loaf, lead CM at Bad Pixel, and in this guide I'm going to be helping you along your journey of working with the Deadside Modkit. Now, I'm going to be assuming for this guide that you have no experience with Unreal 4 at all, so if you do actually know at least the basics, you can skip around in the chapters. So, to begin, here we are in the Modkit, just loaded into the default level. Right in the center we have our viewport, so if you want to move the camera around, just hold right click. If you hit left click, you're going to select whatever you left click on. So, holding right click, you can move around with WASD, Q and E goes up and down, and you can change the speed of the camera with your mouse wheel, or you go over here in the top right and you can slide the camera speed. So now I'm going very, very fast, which is nice on a large level. Here on the right is the world outliner. This is going to show everything that's loaded into the world currently. So you can select it, hit F on it to go to it. And when you do have something selected in the level, you're going to see the details here. This is where you can configure some parameters of blueprints. Over here in the top left, we have our place actors screen. You can find some useful stuff like volumes in here, which we're going to be using pretty soon. I also have the levels tab. You can get that by going to window and then checking levels and then setting it over here by dragging it around. Now in this default area, there's really not much to see here, but this is going to be useful going forwards. And in the bottom, this is your content browser. So right now I have all of the content in the Deadside editor. So, you know, blueprints, items, weapons. Here we have all the rifles, stuff like that. You can click on this button here to see other things like C++ classes and your mods. So to begin, let's make a mod. And it's as easy as just hitting create mod here. You can select a few different templates. For this, I'm going to create a new map. I'm going to name it, so I'm just going to name it Modkit Guide. Can't put spaces, very nice. And you're also going to want to put an author, description, all that stuff, but I'm going to leave it empty for now. And here we are. So now we have a new Modkit Guide content folder. So now we just have a default basic level here. Now you can see on the left we have our persistent level and then the audio, gameplay, and loot levels, which are going to be useful. Now this map doesn't use world composition, so let's show you what that is like. Because if you want to edit the existing Mirny map, you're going to have to get used to working with that. So go to File, Open Level, go in Content, you're going to go to Maps, World 0, and then Open World 0. And this is going to load the Mirny map. Now this is probably not what you expected to see because nothing is actually loaded in yet, except for a whole bunch of blocking volumes, AI pathing, and spawners, I believe, and whatever these are. Now I have a decent computer, and even this is making my FPS go down, so go ahead and hit G, and that will hide everything that's going to be useful. On the left here in the Levels tab, you can see a whole bunch of different sub-levels, and we also have a new button here. Now this summons the world composition, and this is starting to look a little bit more familiar. We can right-click on something, and then load it in. And here we are. Now we've loaded this chunk of the world. And look at that. It's South Military. Now most of your custom maps are probably not going to use the world composition function unless you're already experienced with Unreal and know how to set that up and work with it. I did want to mention it though because part of world composition is also the audio, gameplay, and loot levels. So we have this loaded in here, but we don't have the loot spawners loaded. We don't have our gameplay elements and obviously the audio. So go ahead and load those all in. Again, going to take a second. Alright, so now these three levels are loaded in. So if I hit G again, my frame rate's going to be terrible, but now you can see all of the gameplay elements loaded in. All the audio, all the loot spawners on the entire map is now loaded. If I look down a little bit, it won't be so bad, but you can see here we have AI pathing, mission spawners, which are the M's, the E's are encounter spawners, and these guys here, these bright squares, are our loot spawners. So when you're making your custom map, you're going to want to put all of these loot spawners in the loot level, all the gameplay elements in gameplay, audio and audio. To select which level you're actually editing, you need to right-click on it and hit Make Current. Now I'm editing the gameplay level. You can also use this here on the bottom right, which is probably better if you're not using world composition, since you can see it gives you every level as an option. If you do want to make your own custom maps and events and stuff, I recommend you at least just look around the Mirny map just to see how the game is already set up and learn from that. But even still, we will go over setting up all the events and AI and loot spawners and stuff like that in this video. So let's go back to our little test map. Now here we have our small little basic map. I'm not going to really edit all that much here. We can go into modes, hit landscape, and now I could sculpt more onto it. But for now, let's just set up this map as you would any other. So we're going to go to place actors, go down here in volumes. So volumes are really important to how your map functions. Just an example, let's get a blocking volume. Now by default, these are just going to be set to invisible walls. So your map border is probably going to be a bunch, well, hopefully just a few of these blocking volumes. So with the brush tools here, you can adjust the dimensions. So here I've made a big invisible wall, and I'm just going to drag it over this little hill I made, and now nobody will be able to walk there. But these blocking volumes do a lot more than just act as invisible walls. We have different options here under collision presets. An important one is block base. So if I set it to that, you can now walk in here. It's no longer an invisible wall, but you can't build inside of the volume. This is how you block people from building inside of POIs. You also have the option to do custom collision presets, which gives you a lot more options here. Something cool you can do in the custom setup is block treasure, which will block hidden stashes from spawning inside of the volume. Now next, something I am actually going to set up is a nav mesh bounds volume. Now nav mesh is something that you generate that uses the geometry of your level that the AI is then going to use to pathfind through the level. And what this volume does is it defines the bounds of the nav mesh in the level. So you're telling the engine, build the nav mesh here. So we want to make a little mission here. So I'm going to just make this box kind of huge. And now that we have it placed, we can go ahead and hit build, and our navigation building is completed. Okay, so let's start setting up our first AI event. To do that, we need to make sure we're editing the gameplay level. So we can just go ahead and select that here. Now let's just pretend for the purposes of this guide that this tiny little house here is an entire point of interest, let's say a town. And in Deadside normally, when you walk into a town, sometimes there's AI that spawn and start patrolling around. That's called an encounter, and we're going to set up one of those now. Let's start by going into the blueprints folder here, go into gameplay, and we're going to grab GA base. This is going to be the center of your POI where the encounter is going to be spawning from. It's actually where we're going to add the encounter components. So let's go ahead and drag that into the level. And then we're going to add a component here. Just type encounter, and we're looking for SFPSAC encounter. And now you're going to see a large cylinder appear. This is the spawn radius for the encounter, which you can adjust down here. You want to make it large, but not so large that they're not spawning in all the time, because more AI leads to more server load, right? Right above that, we have the spawn chance, so it's by default a 10% chance whenever a player walks into this radius. We have the respawn time min and max, which determines the amount of time that passes before this encounter can spawn again. And opening this drop-down menu here, we have the min and max optional count, which determines the min and max amount of optional AI that can spawn whenever the event is triggered. So that's great and all, but we need some AI spawners for there to be AI in the encounter. So we're going to add one of those to the encounter component here. So again, we're going to add a component. Now just search spawner. SFPSAC spawner is the right one. And it's going to place a spawner on the encounter component just like that. So I'm just going to drag it down here. Move it along and spin it around. This arrow determines the direction that the AI is facing when it is spawned. You're going to notice it's red right now, which means it isn't set up. So over here on the right in the details tab are all the parameters we need to get this spawner set up. We're going to start with character groups. Go ahead and add an array element, open the drop down menu, and then you'll see character set. So this determines the type of gear that the AI spawns with. So go ahead and open that up. We have a lot of options here. We have military AI, bandits, boss AI. I'm just going to select bandit advanced. And then we have the optional tab. So checking optional enters it into the optional spawn pool. Leaving it unchecked means that this spawner will spawn this AI every time the encounter is triggered. Then we have some settings for route, which we're going to cover in a bit. We're going to go ahead and skip over to AI config. This is going to determine everything from the AI's aggression as well as the sight and hearing. So opening the menu here, again, lots of options from different types of AI that are in the game. And I'm just going to hit Bandit Advanced again. If for some reason I wanted the Bandit to have better sight, or at least different sight, you can override the default behavior in the AI config here. So doing that would make it, you'd give the Bandit the vision of a convoy sniper, which I don't think we really want, so I'm just going to leave that empty. You're fine leaving both of these empty. And lastly, we have a hearing volume, which we're going to set up next. So hearing volumes are a way to tell the AI that this is a building that you shouldn't really be hearing very much out of. So if you're shooting outside of the building, they're not necessarily going to get aggressive immediately and run out. If they see you, they will. But that's a whole different story, right? So let's go ahead and place a hearing volume inside of this building. We're going to find one of those all the way in the C++ classes. Go ahead and open Deadside and Server, AI, and it's going to be down here, SFPS AI Hearing Volume. Now again, just like the other volumes we talked about, you can use these sliders to adjust the dimensions to make it fit. And there we go. Now we have our hearing volume set up. By the way, it's also a good idea to be naming all of these things because you're going to have a lot of encounters, a lot of hearing volumes in your level. So naming them with the name of the POI would make sense. So maybe this POI is Yantar. So I named this hearing volume Yantar building something or other so that you can keep track of it. I've kind of skipped that since this is just a guide, but it's a good tip in general. Now that we've set up the hearing volume, you can assign it to AI by going to the spawner here, clicking on hearing volume, and now you're going to see SFPS AI hearing volume. Again, you should name it because this is very non-specific. You'd have a list here of a bunch of these named hearing volumes, and unless you named it, you wouldn't know which one's which. I'm going to go ahead and assign it for fun. Now, the last thing we need to do is make a route for the AI to walk around when the encounter starts. So, we're going to go back to the content folder, blueprints, gameplay, and go over to here to RO base. This is a route actor. Now, these aren't really all that complicated. These are just routes that use the nav mesh in the level to tell the AI where to go. Each point does use more server data, of course, so try to keep the least amount of waypoints possible. So 0 moves the whole route, but you can configure the individual points like this, and you can make new ones by just holding left alt and dragging in the direction you want it to go. So I'm just going to have them walk around in a square around the house. Just like that. And boom, we have our route actor. Again, you probably want to name it so that when you go to assign it to this spawner, like so, you know which one you've added. And now you see the pink line where once the AI spawned, it's going to walk over there and start going around the route. So let's say we want it to start at waypoint number 3, not 0, because why would you walk that way, right? Well, we can do that by configuring the start waypoint here. Type in 3, hit enter, and there you go. It looks like the AI is still pathing over here to get there. I'm not completely sure why, but, well, moving it made it better. So we've now set up one encounter at this specific house with one AI. It's pretty basic, but all the mechanics are there. So let's say we want to make a mission at this house too. Well, the gameplay area is already here because this is our POI. All we need to do is hit add component to this gameplay area. But instead of encounter, type in mission, SFPSAC mission, and go ahead and add it. Now we have another spawn radius circle. For fun, let's just make it a pink, I guess. Now the parameters here are going to be pretty similar to what we have in the encounter. Of course, we have the radius, which I'm using here. We have completed time, so this is the amount of time after the mission ends that it's in the completed status. So the amount of time the loot box is loaded in, essentially. So after the completed time ends, then the wait time starts, and then after the wait time, then the mission can potentially spawn again. Now to start, we need to add a variant. By default, it's going to make an easy mission variant. So you can see here you have the reward set, which you probably would want to set as easy. And we have the min and max optional amount of AI to spawn for this mission. We also have mission text ID, so that's the text that shows up inside chat. 0 is easy, 1 is medium, 2 is hard, and 3 is epic. But this is pretty cool because it allows us to add multiple missions into one mission area. So easy, medium, hard, epic, you get the idea. It also means we can use the same route actors and the same hearing volumes that we already have set up in the mission area. The only difference is that we need to make different spawners. So let's go over to our mission, add a component, and it's just as easy as typing in spawner. Now you'll see that the spawner is an M instead of an E. And we already know how to set up one of these, so I'm going to skip that for now. So it's just going to be red. The only thing we have to do now is create scenes for the reward box to spawn in when the mission is activated. Now this is one of the more complicated things when setting up a mission. We're going to make that by going to our mission component. You're going to add a component and type scene. Just like that. And it's going to add a scene actor into this area. This is going to spawn in basically an invisible tiny actor, which is the point where the loot box is going to spawn. Now it's important to note that the loot box isn't going to be included in the nav mesh that we built earlier, so if I did put the box right here, the AI would walk into it and wouldn't know how to walk around it. So you're going to make sure that your route actors don't intersect with your loot box scenes. So to actually spawn the loot box at this scene, you're going to go over to component tags, add an element, and type reward point. Like so, no spaces. And that should do it. It's going to take a little bit of trial and error to get the actual loot box to spawn where you want, but that's modding for you. There's going to be a lot of trial and error no matter what you're doing. So that's an encounter and mission mostly set up. We didn't set up the spawner. The last thing we need to do is go back to our gameplay area here, select the mission component, and go to reward loot box class. Just search mission, and you'll see loot box mission 01. It's always going to be that no matter which type of mission you're doing. So next, let's move on to patrols. We have encounters, which are AI that spawn in at specific POIs, but Deadside also has AI that walk around the long roads, right? That's what we're going to be making now. So we're here in the gameplay blueprints folder again. Instead of GA area or RO base, we're going to do PA base. This is a patrol actor. Now it's a lot like the route actor, especially when you're setting it up, except for these large circles. So let me move this over here. The pink path is going to define where the AI loosely is going to travel, and the circles are where all of the AI need to be inside of before they start moving to the next point. You might have even seen this in game, where some AI will be walking down the road and one is trailing for whatever reason, and all the AI stop until the last one catches up. That's because they have to wait for all of them to be inside of this radius here before they can keep walking. Now again, it's important to note that you want to place as little of these as you possibly can to help the server be optimized. So setting up a patrol is a lot like setting up a route actor, except we have a few more parameters here. Max patrol points is the maximum amount of patrols that can be active on this route at one time. Time deviation determines the amount of time between each patrol spawn. You can set this to 00, which is fine, or 05, which is the maximum amount. And dead time here is the min and max amount of time after the patrol dies when it can then be spawned again. Patrol target radius is the radius that the AI need to walk into. There's also special patrol target radius, so you really have two. Now special patrols are actually just convoys. That's the convoy event. So all of your convoys are going to be using your patrol routes on the map when you set them up. And just below the special patrol target radius is the can spawn special patrol point. So if you want a convoy to be able to be spawned on this route, go ahead and check that. Low priority just sets the patrol point as a low priority when spawning AI. So if there's a lot of AI already active on the map at once, if you set this to low priority, then this server might decide not to spawn in this patrol because there's already a decent amount of AI load. Now down here under the patrol parameters, just like the spawners over here, we have our character sets and AI config. So again, I'm just going to set this to patrol advanced, but for AI config, going to use roaming. So we've basically set up a patrol route and a potential convoy route. If you want to adjust convoys and how they function, you can do that, but you can't adjust specific convoys. Like you can't adjust, at least at the moment, this specific convoy on this route, and I'll show you why. So if we go to blueprints, gameplay, and then under here, special patrols, we have the patrol manager blueprint. And opening that up, we have all the parameters for convoys, because convoys are spawned by the patrol manager and the event manager in the game. They aren't individually placed on the map like encounters and missions are. So these are your options. You can adjust how convoys are, what type of AI config they use, what items they spawn, what items they use while patrolling, that sort of thing. Well, for the most part, those are the most complicated events to set up. Next, let's move on to heli crashes. So going back to gameplay, we have gameplay events here. And we have both our roaming trader and heli crash events in this folder. So to place a heli crash event into the map, just grab heli crash point and drag it down somewhere. And you can see it's pretty much already set up. We have all the spawners, which are configured to spawn heli crash AI. We have our heli crash texture here. We also have the loot reward spawn point. So really, whenever you place this into the map, all you have to do is adjust the orientation of the reward and the heli crash itself to match with, the level geometry. Same with the spawners. You can adjust the individual spawners and the AI that are there if you want to spawn different AI at this specific heli crash point. Roaming traders are really even easier. You just drag the roaming trader point into the gameplay level and boom, there you go. I'm not really sure why this texture is messed up, but again, this is just the spawn point. It's not an actual texture. And then the last event, airdrops, in the airdrops folder under gameplay, very much the same. You get the airdrop point right here, drag it into the level, and there you go. You have a visual representation of where the airdrop will drop whenever you place it into the gameplay level. So, now that we've covered everything with making your own custom levels, I think it's time to talk about modding with blueprints. Now, this is kind of an intimidating subject, especially if you've never done this before. And I'll be honest, I haven't had much time doing this myself, but I'm still going to try my best to make this easy to understand for somebody that's new. Now, just as an example, let's open up the mod registry in the example mod that comes with the mod kit. And here we have a lot. Again, don't get too intimidated by this, because I think it's actually a lot more simple than you might expect. So starting at the top, this is the event init mod node, and this is when the mod is initialized by the server on startup, and then it's going to start to make all these changes with these commands. So, for example, static data set max stack is setting the max stack size for shotgun ammo, changing it to 5, just with this one little box. And anytime you can grab these nodes by right-clicking, you're going to want to unclick context sensitive, as it says right here. And let's set the damage of a weapon. So, data set damage. Now this is going to be very messy, but I'm just going to start dragging stuff around here. We're going to connect these together. So this is executed first, second, third. Now we're going to get the class of what we're setting the damage of. So AKM. I pasted one, that's why there's 2. And we can just set the weapon damage right here. So 40. And this is great because multiple mods can make changes like this and not conflict with each other. So say another mod changed the damage of the AK. The one first in the order would execute this, and that would be the one that actually made the change on the server. So, if you're new to blueprint programming, this example mod does a really good job of explaining what each of these things do, so you can start to get an idea of how things work. There are also plenty of other good guides on YouTube about the basics of blueprint programming. There's great documentation from Epic Games themselves that I also highly recommend if you have questions about specific blueprints or engine functionality. So editing blueprint parameters through the Modkit registry event graph is fun, but you might want to do some more complicated stuff, like attaching logic to existing blueprints. And we can do that by adding a mod component to that blueprint over here. So let me show you how you can do that. First, we're going to make a mod component in our mod folder. So blueprint class, search mod component, and let's name it UAZ mod, because I'm going to attach this to a UAZ. Okay, so we have a blueprint component that we can now edit through the event graph here. So we're going to use event begin play, and then we can add our own logic here. And so let's say we add a whole bunch of logic. Now we're going to add it through the mod registry. So we're going to add a component mapping here. Actor class is the actor we're attaching the component to, so UAZ. There it is. And the component class is the component we're attaching to the actor, so UAZ mod. And for mod actor class, you're going to select a BP mod actor. And you're going to want to compile and save. So an example of what this will look like, and you'll have access to this too. Let's go here to BP UAZ So here you are, event begin play, the logic starts to execute, and there's a lot here, but this is just an example of what you can do with components attached to blueprints. Now on our official wiki, we are going to have a modding page, which is going to go much more into detail about blueprint programming, but since this is just a basic getting started guide, I think we'll leave it at that, let you guys experiment with everything, and once you're ready, you can take a look at that official Deadside Wiki page. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, I hope you found it helpful, thanks for watching.